Quick poll before we get started. How many of you are building like AI apps or AI agents today? Raise your hand. Okay, cool. And how many of you have your AI agents or apps in production, so accessing production system? Okay, so roughly 40% of the hands that went up earlier. This is very timely, the topic that we're going to talk about, which is, we've seen lots of cool AI demos, and of course, it's easy to build demos and do POCs. But the poll that I just did is very common in that in a lot of companies, everybody's experimenting and trying to build AI apps and agents, but not all of them are in production. And I think this is, we've all seen like the promise of what AI can do for us. But taking these ideas or demos or POCs into production takes a lot of work, because if you think about supportability, if you think about trust, security, and lots of other considerations. So I'm really excited. We have two product builders joining us today on stage who are at the heart of this transformation, and they are taking a transformation and sort of this new AI production. So maybe to kick things off, introduce yourselves and your companies and the problems you're trying to tackle.
You want to go first?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Emma. I'm the founder of Porsche.ai. We have a new product out as of yesterday called Rezonant. Prior to Porsche, I was running engineering for Stripe in the UK. Porsche is an open source framework for building production grade agents, and our newest product, Rezonant, which we released yesterday, still behind a wait list, essentially allows PMs, project managers, engineering managers to turn their normal documents that they use into well-specified chunks that can go into Linear, Jira, or straight to coding agents. So that's me.
Hello, my name is Trygve. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Riff.ai. Up to recently, we were called DataButton, so you might know that. We have an AI agent that generates apps and agents for you, like proper apps in terms of like React frontends, Python, fast API backends. And we do the full circle, from like ideation to deploy and hosting and everything. I say that because I assume it's a developer crowd. And our focus is on enabling companies and employees at companies to generate and solve their own problems, generate solutions to problems they see every day. And they chat with the agent, and that does that. And that involves like a substantial set of challenges that are not just to create the agent in the first place. Thank you.
Amazing. Awesome. So there is a pattern here in both of your approaches. Both of you have taken a very product-centric approach where you're describing, at least in your structured coding processes, a product structure, either through the tools that you mentioned or the systems and customers that you're helping with your startup. So I'm just curious, like, what drove that particular choice? Emma?
Yeah, it was really the combination of two things, the kind of two sides of the equation for us. One is to solve an immediate pain point for our users that, we did user research, et cetera, to kind of find out about and also experienced ourselves, which is everybody hates writing tickets, right? Nobody loves that, right? It's the most tedious part of product specification. And the second thing is actually, like, if you think about vibe engineering and how we write code with agents, agents perform way better if they've got well-specified tickets, chunks, et cetera. And so you combine those two things together and you're in such a sweet spot really to create a great system all the way through. So I guess it's, startups are a bit of serendipity and a bit of anticipation, and it's all of those things for us.
I'd love to explain that choice. So where a lot of these vibe coding tools is like ID to, like, you imagine something and you have something in your head and you can see it, right? We haven't been like that. We are about solving problems and problems you have. So we guide our non-technical users into more of a development flow. So that means like generating tasks, and the agent works on tasks. And the reason we do that is because a well-specified task gives effectively the agent guardrails. So it keeps it on track. Especially is like as models evolve, it's less and less of a problem, but it has been quite a big problem. And as you go, it loses track, right? It loses its context. Feels like working with someone with Alzheimer, right? And the task kind of anchors that, keeping it on track and steering it to the right direction. And so that's why we've done that.
Amazing. So you mentioned guardrails, and in this case, it's making sure you have the right context to the problem you're trying to solve. But that's a very visible guardrail, like, you know, you're going to provide the context. I'm curious, what other guardrails have you built into your systems that maybe aren't quite obvious or visible, but really important for your product to work, or more importantly, for your customers to use your products?
Yeah, maybe I'll talk about something which I think is a really great design pattern for agentic systems that we built into the Porsche, the open source thing that we have, which is essentially, so you're taking natural language, and obviously the problem is that it generates a task in its list of tasks that's insane, right? And you're like, how do I get rid of that while still keeping a system that is able to take any prompt? And so essentially we came up with this system where you can take your plans, your list of tasks or whatever, and feed it back in a kind of like RAG-based system, such that it always has a list of example tasks to base it on. And that means, depending on how big a scope, you can tune your system's reliability just based on that context that you feed back in conditionally. And that pattern you can apply in so many different ways, is basically conditional list of examples tuned for your specific agentic application.
Amazing. And anything from you?
Yeah, we're lucky in some form, shape, or form. We own the entire development environment, right? So we own where it runs. We own the development environment. We own everything, and that of course enables us to sandbox a lot. And so the actual development experience there isn't that bad. But if this is going to have value, then these systems need to be able to read and write to core systems, right? If you're going to do CRM management, for instance, it's a very popular case. Like, you build an agent that goes around, it takes every customer you have, it like uses SERP API and Perplexity, and it like figures out more about that person and then enriches the CRM. That agent gets write access to your CRM, right? And agents cannot be trusted with just deciding that. So how do you ensure that it can only write to the parts where it can write, and so on? So those kind of guardrails is something we focus a lot on.
Yep. So you mentioned you can't trust agents to write to your systems, but I guess, how do you both think about trust in your own products? So, I mean, security, it comes up as a concern oftentimes, like, customers are nervous with write access. So are there any learnings or takeaways for folks who are building these types of apps from a security standpoint? Like, what are the considerations you've had to think about? You and I were talking about RBAC a little while ago. So, is it that? Is it beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different ways we can kind of talk about this particular question. Obviously, from a pure security perspective, there are the guardrails. What's appropriate for someone within a particular role? That's what we were discussing. We were discussing how can you safely allow a UX designer to ship code all the way to production. What can that mean? And I was talking about adding kind of RBAC on top of our system, role-based access controls for anyone that doesn't know that definition. And I think the other important piece is like adding on layers of human in the loop, right? So that people are always taking responsibility for what is getting shipped or put into, because Jira is still an important source of production data, right? So we've been very clear that, you have to have human in the loop in many different ways, but it's always amazing to me how lazy people are as well, because we talk to customers and they're like, is that going to be 100% correct? And I'm like, no, of course it's not going to be 100% correct, right? Like, I'm going to aim for like 95%, but like, this is still a communication tool, you should still be using it. And people do accept that, but we deliberately build that in as you should review it, you should use it as a drafting UI, etc. And some people really buy into that, and some people don't mind if there's a little bit of inaccuracy in there. I'm always fascinated to see how this changes over time.
Yeah, so we've had like 150,000 people this year building apps, and you won't believe how people are different in how they chat with AI. it's a very, very large spread, and people have a lot of different ideas around there. So I could take one example where someone built like a way to do transfers from the crypto wallet. And as a very, 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 very non-technical person arguing with the AI, right? And then talking pretty confusing, no? So that started like transferring funds, right? So there isn't, you cannot assume a behavior. It's an open damn text box and an open chat. And there's like tons of ways to confuse an AI agent when it's like that. So guardrails are very, very needed. Yeah.
Amazing. So maybe switching to some customer examples. Maybe if both of you can share, like, you know, what are your customers using you for? What are some of these, without sharing any confidential customer information, obviously, but some examples of how customers are using you in their environments, and maybe what kind of results that they see with your tools.
You want to start?
Absolutely. I can start with, I'll start with my favorite customer, who's a custom furniture maker. He's like using CNC machines to create cupboards. Half of his time has been spending like talking to clients, sending back and forth 3D models. So that's the first thing he did something about, like they can chat with AI instead, and it will generate drawings and show them, cutting like 30% there. And then he went on to the whole production line. Like, Jesus Christ, it takes forever to go from like this 3D model CAD thing to like something the CNC machine can do. Yeah, we chat with AI, we get that up, blank, done. Then it's like, how do we track our manufacturing process? Up with an app for that. And so that's an example, and the rest just scales that. Then it's like sales teams doing CRM enrichment. It's like everyone for some reason hates the interface to Salesforce. Then can I, for some reason, have like a simpler app that I can do the updates on, and so on.
I guess from our side, you know, with the SDK, we spent a lot of time doing horizontal consultative sales. Honestly, I don't recommend building a company like that. It's not fun. But I think the kind of categories that we saw typically are, particularly if you're kind of going to outsource this versus build it as a, you know, first-class primitive into your product, is essentially kind of like, if you have a group of people who have trained to be reading a policy and making a decision, you can 100% encode that in a multi-agent system. So that's the kind of first class of obvious use cases. And then the second one that I would say has become more and more common to come to us over the past kind of few months is kind of like expert chat-based systems, you know, like financial advice, where you have a body of information, but you also want to take actions. So an example of this is a company that basically like does metadata on top of surveys, but they then want to add an agentic layer, because it turns out if you've got thousands and thousands of pieces of survey data, it's actually quite hard to find the right information. And so they want to be able to use an agent to get to the right point and then do access and authorization actions on top of that. So,
Wow, that's amazing. So so you both have customers who are using you in production. That's really cool. You know, earlier you'd mentioned, you mentioned a little bit about context and how context is important. It's almost like you know, maybe the new currency for AI. What did you do in your products, in both of your respective products, with regards to context? Like, you know, it's everything from context length and like, you know, how do you handle context for in your products today?
yeah, I mean, I think context engineering is agent engineering, really. It's the most important bit. So, you know, obviously we already talked about that kind of tip that we used within the kind of Porsche framework. Within the Resonant-based system, the most important thing for us to have a great product is latency. And so it's a balance between gathering context on the fly and having offline cached context that we keep up to date. And in order to do that, you know, we had to kind of create a context generation system, which is what we did. And the most important thing for us is keeping the latency of the job end to end under 30 seconds. 30 seconds is about the maximum where I'll stay at my screen before losing interest, essentially. But yeah, I think over time, working out how to blend human context, the LLM context relevant to your team, your role, etc., is going to be increasingly where we focus and double down.
We've been doing this for 2 years. For 2 years, we have like a bit more than 2 years, we have sat and made the coding agents, right? It used to be hard. It used to be damn hard. And then it's easier now, actually, because tool calling is good. Tool calling is parallel. So these days, most of the context is something the agent asks for. Like it can search the code base to find like things, pull that into context. Earlier, we needed to somehow cram the entire code base into context, right, on every call. Now that is less, and so things like that. I think that tool calling has to a large degree replaced some of that, but it means that the agent has like 120 tools.
Yeah, and so with you know, so you talked about tool calling, which is really helpful. So allows you to probably do multiple agents, and you have, in your case, you're owning the whole workflow. But I'm curious, what about documentation? Like, has your views changed on, like, you know, are agents just creating all the documentation? Like, how, you know, how have you kind of adopted, or how do you view documentation essentially?
The agent has a tool to generate documentation. Yes.
So they just generate all the document. What about from? Are you using any external tools where documentation matters?
Like which packages and so on.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a question I was almost asking earlier when we talked about the open source and the future and so on. Because most of our users have no idea. They are using a lot of good open source tooling, and like the agent can install any npm package, it can install any pip package. It just like collects it, and they don't relate to which agent framework the agent has chosen to use, and neither do we, right? So what does that mean for the quality of future open source software? That's an interesting question, I think. How do you stand out?
What about your product? Any impact to documentation?
Yeah, I'm always in two minds on documentation, because the same problem that humans have with documentation, agents have as well, right? Documentation gets out of date pretty quickly, and so our customers on the Rezonant side do ask us. They're like, well, we have all this stuff in Confluence. Can we upload it to the system? And we will add that as a feature. But it's also not kind of our P0, because I think you can flood the agent with a lot of documentation that we think is the best way to understand a system. But for an agent, it's not always the best way. You know, the best kind of input to an agent is often to be as close to the code as possible. And so this human interpretation layer that we think is useful sometimes can do the opposite. And so instead, I kind of try to guide people, if I can, to like push the documentation into the code base, because that's where you're going to see the longevity of it, as well as, you know, you maintain it properly. Agents look at it in every single part of the workflow, not just ours. So yeah, I guess
that is what I mean too. It generates like API documentation, for instance.
Yeah.
Right? It's more like that.
Yep.
Not like user manual.
Now, you know, switching gears to one of the things you will hear, at least from people who are building these products, is you hear about, like, you know, context length, like how much context can you provide. So I'm just curious, because I think like memory is going to become a very important part of this AI wave, and so how do you think about memory with AI, and how are your products trying to like address that problem?
I'm sure you have a much better answer than me as well. I'll say one thing. We have never found a way to use a very long context window in a good way. We use much smaller than that, just to have precision. So that's all.
So a better precision if it's a smaller.
Yeah, like the 1 million context window, it loses precision.
Yeah.
I got to say, I completely agree. You know, I think the question of memory is extremely relevant if you have very long-running tasks and processes, which, like, I don't think is the, you know, this is why context management is the question of how do you engineer these great systems. But in the case of both of our applications, it's kind of a, you start fresh, a little bit fresh at least. So the way that we add memory in is you can essentially run what we refer to as a refinement multiple times and ingest the memory of the system. So it kind of does it automatically. But to the same point, we try and keep our context actually quite short. And over time, I see it as super important that because we understand the person, the role, their place in the code base, that the context will be dependent on that. But I don't think, again, we'll use that full million tokens.
Yeah,
We don't need to keep expanding.
so what it does as it goes along is to write learnings. That agent does. Like what is learned, it's like pushing into a memory in a way. It does create a checklist of learnings. But most is like more like you as a human. You sit and you find, how was that again? And you search it up. And like, so it becomes more of that kind of workflow. No?
Okay, awesome. All right, we're gonna open it up for any questions in the room, and then I do have a wrap up for both of you, but I want to see if there's a question back there.
I sat next to MasterCard yesterday, actively working on that, enabling agents to purchase through MasterCard. That's an enabler for you.
I don't think the issue is the tech, right? You can 100% imagine how you can build a system with the right guardrails to do this. I think the problem is trying to work out how to describe to an agent what you want without going through the process is extremely, extremely difficult. So it's more of a like UX human agent interface issue to me than a underlying. I mean, that is a tech issue, right?
But in our case, the user would be prompted, right? Do you want to pay for this? Yes, no, for sure. Like we do that on files even. Like, do you want to delete this file, right? Because like there's something about like auditability too, like who did what and who proved what and so on. Like what is our responsibility? Am I now responsible for that agent going and transferring funds somewhere? Because right, so for sure we're gonna have like an approval process. Not in our product, no. But there are probably cases for that, like trading bots and so on, exists already, no. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I can just add that's the pattern that I've seen with customers. I'm going to plug my product now. So we do authentication authorization. So that's exactly the use case, which is the agent will do all the hard work. Like a classic example would be you're traveling to Helsinki. You can ask an agent. You can imagine asking an agent to go book your itinerary for you. But you don't want them to just book everything. You probably want to review what the agent is doing on your behalf. So I still think that's kind of the human in the loop, another version of human in the loop process that I don't think goes away anytime soon.
You do the same with a travel agency, don't you?
Yeah.
If a travel agency comes to, they don't just book you something. They ask, is this okay? All right. You don't trust humans with it either.
Right.
But maybe then the thing that you need to solve like all of these problems is almost like the concept of a kind of like hold, the ability to semi-buy something, like I want the agent to have got access to the stock and for it to be a press of a button where it just goes through, right? But what I don't want it to have to do is to then go back and reclaim that stock, particularly in the case of like a travel booking. And so if you could add that into the system, I think that would be a huge unlock.
Agreed. Okay, any other questions? I saw another hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think it was Emma particularly, you were talking about how there's kind of a margin for error you have to build in with these technologies, so maybe 80 to 90% accuracy. You talked about like UX as an example as opposed to full accuracy. I mean, I think like for the most part, the conventional wisdom is that there's going to always need to be this like human in the loop, but there is kind of a debate between is AI going to continue to become so advanced that inevitably you either sort of don't need human in the loop or it just becomes almost indistinguishable, that there's such a small margin of error? Do you think that there's always going to be an inherent margin of error with the technology that us as the humans in this case have to account
I feel like that's a very hard prediction question. It'd be very easy in like a year to sit here and have given the wrong answer. But I also think, hallucinations are a fundamental part of how the underlying technology works, which I think the model companies will continue to work on. But I think that you're also competing against the fact that human language is fuzzy, right? And so the obvious agent errors where they do something where anybody would look at it and say that's wrong are going to be harder and harder. I think those will go to very close to zero. But I think a lot of agent use cases we envision rely on a level of specification in human language that doesn't exist, and the answer to that should be human in the loop. So.
Just to add, I think there are some use cases where maybe, this is my prediction, there are some cases where maybe agents will be better than humans. One example, how many of you have work in your companies, and especially large companies have approval processes, like if there's an invoice or a PO, right? Ken is right there. So you go through many steps. Now there's a very, you can do very sophisticated phishing campaigns, right? And humans, why do we have all these breaches, and why do we have all these scams and stuff? It's because humans make mistakes.
No, it's
right?
because my CEO really needed a gift card.
That's true. Exactly. So I think in those types of scenarios, maybe I think agents will be better because they won't make those types of mistakes potentially. So I do think there are some scenarios where maybe we'll start seeing confidence in companies saying, yeah, there are certain tasks we're okay with agents performing, potentially.
If I can kind of condense what I think you're getting at, is it's something people keep repeating, which is like AI. We're seeing this with all the massive layoffs too that have happened because of AI, that AI is functionally, should be useful to automate tasks, but not necessarily like replace jobs. Is that kind of what you're sort of getting at?
Yeah, there are some tasks, I think, that's my prediction, that some tasks will be comfortable and relying on agents to do them, because they are very deterministic with their diagnostics and checks. So, another question.
I'm actually asking all of you, Shiven as well. Where do you see the role of IAM, identity and permissions in, as enterprise start adopting AI applications? So yeah, I'm guessing I'm asking both sides of the
It's definitely
spectrums
a you
here.
question.
Yeah. This is a layup, I think. I think, identity, so authentication, authorization is a problem today in existing apps and existing architectures, right? So I don't think the problem is going away with agents. I think the same problems exist, but they get amplified at a very, very high scale. So I'll give you an example. Today, when you're logging into an application, the application is a front door, and there are only deterministic things you can do in an app, right? But with agents, that boundary disappears because theoretically agents have the freedom. It's non-deterministic, and it can query a database, query pages, can go out on the web. So it can do, agents potentially can do a lot of things. And so I think companies are really nervous that if we put agents out and if they don't have secure databases or APIs or documents or wiki pages, then the risk exposure is pretty significant. So I think it has an important role, but I think the severity and scale now has just exploded because of what's possible with agents. And I know, Emma, you have some thoughts on this too.
Yeah, do you think we'll see a variant of OAuth that, because I think the problem with OAuth at the moment, because delegated OAuth is so common, right, that it's the easiest thing to do right now is just give your agents your permissions. Yep. Do you think we'll see the easy evolution of kind of like some more sophisticated version of OAuth that creates the right paradigm between like agents that belong to a human, essentially? Is that something, I mean, you guys, I'm curious, is that something that's coming out?
Yeah, so in the standards body, yeah, that's kind of what we were pushing for. Not just us, by the way, it's many other companies. So that is in the works, and I think the MCP and spec is getting updated to kind of address those challenges.
Yeah, totally.
All right. I think we're almost out of time here, so I'll have one. We'll wrap up. What's on your? I'm just curious. Like next 12 months, like what are some big items on your roadmap? What are you thinking about?
I am extremely excited to work on a kind of tool for PMs to do prototyping within their PRDs, essentially, at the right level of granularity so that you're still using it as a communication tool. That's the role of the PM to me, rather than trying to make a full production grade app, though I think that's got its place as well, don't get me wrong. That's what I'm really excited about.
No, we are trying to solve that problem you just talked about, really. So today we are actually, you are giving through OAuth permissions, your permissions to that agent. You are, and then through what groups you are part of, then that will be set. So to do that in a better way, that sounds like a nice roadmap item you just gave me.
Okay. All right. Well, you guys were amazing. Emma, Trygve, please give them a round of applause. Thank you so much.